And the truth is that the aviation minister himself has some tough questions to answer. The government surely should have been monitoring the situation. They should have been prepared for what played out at airports. What was the aviation regulator doing? There has also been a suggestion of conflict of interest with suggestions that those in DGCA required to make an assessment of IndiGo are not neutral. Many of them have links to the airline. So frankly, if heads have to roll, it's across sectors. It's in the aviation regulator, it's in the airline itself, and many would argue that it's also in the government. Let's get going. Before I come to an aviation perspective, just from a brand perspective, Dilip, nightmare scenario for the airline, poorly handled, bringing out a sort of foreigner CEO who seemed very far removed from the emotions that most people went through at airports, and also not really addressing why this happened when there are 2 years to implement these safety norms. How do you see it from a brand perspective, Dilip?
The brand of IndiGo has been damaged quite severely, and this will be the recurring motive whenever IndiGo is mentioned. It is not going to be able to take this and pass it over. It's not something that will be forgotten. The second thing is that, if you ask me, as you just said in your introduction, other airlines had the same amount of time and they were able to comply. So everybody in the business and in the aviation business knows that IndiGo was offered multiple opportunities to train pilots, and they had adequate time, but they refused all offers to have more training facilities for themselves. So it was an act of willful omission that they were doing. Number three, the biggest culprit in a sense is the regulator. What was DGCA doing? DGCA should have had timelines on how each aviation company would have to be recruiting pilots to make up for the norms that they had put in place 2 years ago. So in a sense, they were complicit in this criminal act of negligence towards the citizens of India. But the image of Indian aviation has also taken a hit, because the world has seen that Indian aviation regulator is weak and Indian aviation companies are willing to cut corners and make corners where corners don't need to exist.
One of the very strong statements you said, Dilip, before I open it up, you said the DGCA is complicit in this criminal action, and it's very important to say criminal what has happened. It compromises on safety, quite apart from causing enormous physical, social, and economic distress to passengers.
If you look at safety,
yeah.
If you look at safety, we've already had the situation of Air India and the crash and the confusion around black boxes and who was liable. So DGCA must recognize that it is a regulator. It actually comes even above the ministry as far as the airline companies are concerned. It is charged with the duty of independently regulating the sector. And if it is not capable of doing that, then the fault actually begins there. Companies, both the management and the board, are liable for the kind of stuff they've done. But the fact is that the signs were out there in the marketplace much earlier than this fiasco actually happened.
Let's open this up now. I will bring you, Wing Commander, both Wing Commanders. So let me start with Dr. Bakshi first. How do you see it, sir?
Thank you, Barkha. Thank you very much. This aspect, I have been noticing it for a very long time. But other airlines did take positive steps. And the pilot fatigue matter, the involvement of aviation medicine advice matter has been very long associated with civil aviation. There is no doubt about it. But IndiGo failing, let me start. India has aviation sector. IndiGo is not in charge of aviation sector, it is DGCA. It is DGCA which makes the rule and calls the shot. I cannot say my subordinate did something which I don't know. Now I will inquire. That is not the answer. The very fact DGCA knew, and if DGCA does not have the monitoring system, they have to change the system. First thing, DGCA must put in professionals in the job. They must do. I'd all advocated long back. I mean, I shouldn't use the word. I've suggested a long back that DGCA must produce a independent autonomy body of professionals. They should do the regular civil air staff inspection of all the airlines and all the aviation aspects of India, not only airlines. That is what we are missing. We think that airline flying is the only civil flying. There are so many other things. But here, IndiGo is in question. The question is, DGCA knew that they have a recruiting problem, deliberate or non-deliberate, whatever the case may be. They should have intervened straight away. They should have had the authority to ground the airline, but they cannot ground it because I know it very well. They don't have the replacement. That is why my suggestion would be to DGCA for future that please work out with Air Force. Earlier, you do the better. We used to have auxiliary Air Force at one time. Barkha, till 1960 it was there. Auxiliary Air Force actually did lot of work, even providing to pilots to the airline, pilots for the civil
But
other
But Dr.
aspects.
Bakshi, this is not about a shortage of pilots. They had all the time to hire more pilots. They could have taken pilots on contract.
But question is, I am telling you, Barkha, why the shortage of pilot? Why DGCA could not do? They could not even know when to exercise their authority. The
Absolutely. So I
person
think
sitting out there, he does not know when to exercise his authority. He
both
thinks
you and
everything is
Dilip,
good, so nobody
Sir,
to tell him.
both you and Dilip Cherian have made the point that the regulator has failed. The regulator has clearly failed. And now for the regulator to also respond to, how this should be fixed, I don't know, because the regulator itself is in the line of fire. Captain Panikkar, what I want you to do is explain to our audience why this is directly a flight safety issue. Obviously, the stranded baggage, the people not getting home, not getting to funerals and weddings is awful. But this is actually about flight safety. This is about those who fly the planes being rested enough for there not to be a safety issue. Until the public understands that this is not about one company and one aviation debate, it's actually about all of us, people will not understand what's at stake. So could I ask you to do that and then give your take on the issue?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show, Barkha. Now, let me take you back a little bit as to where all this actually started. This started off with an ICAO directive in the form of a SARP. SARP stands for Standards and Recommended Practices. ICAO Annex 6 Part 1 deals with how to manage fatigue. Fatigue is an issue not just with airlines, it's an issue which regulators all across the globe have grappled with. So all these inputs were available to ICAO, and they have their expert committees which sits down, evaluates all the responses, and formulates a suggested course of action. Now, this suggested course of action is sent to all the 195 countries that come under ICAO in the form of the SARP, the Standards and Recommended Practices. Each country examines the SARP and converts it. First, it examines it, sees the applicability, and if it is applicable or if it is something that they do not agree with, they can also do that. And they finally implement it in the form of a law. In India, this law comes in the form of a CAR, or a civil aviation requirement. The Director General of the Directorate General of Civil Aviation is empowered with the authority to convert this SARP into law via the CAR. So the CAR that refers to fatigue management or fatigue risk management system is what we call the CAR 7J Part 3, or 7J3 for short. This deals with pilot fatigue, and an adjacent CAR also deals with the fatigue conditions of the crew. So now fatigue is recognized as one of the major factors where aviation safety is concerned, because the pilots have to have the capability of being alert at all times during their duty period. The regulators across the world are unanimous in their concern that pilots require adequate rest. Normally, this
And
is split,
yeah, sorry.
in the region of about a week. So now what this particular car had sought to do was to increase the weekly rest from 36 hours, which included 2 local nights, to 48 hours, including 2 local nights. This was the major change which has come about in the car. If you remember, the car had first come out in the beginning of January 2024 with an implementation date of 1st of June 2024. Whenever a fresh car has come out, the DGCA puts it up on a public website where all the interested parties can comment upon it and give a feedback. This
If I may interject there, those dates are important because it actually tells you how much time Indigo had
exactly,
to
exactly.
implement this.
I'm just coming to that.
Yeah.
So the implementation date was the 1st of June 2024. So everybody, including Indigo, knew what was coming. Now, if you examine just one aspect of the changes that were introduced by the car, of just this increase in the 12-hour rest period, when you translate it into a week, which consists of 168 hours, it impacts roughly 15% of the time that is available for a scheduled air transport operator, which he
Yeah.
would be losing each week. Now, this translates in turn, coupled with the other restrictions of night flying, to roughly about a 20% increase from any current pilot strength.